maneuver!
Hey there, everybody. I got a real special one for you. I'm going to try to keep it really quick because there's not a lot of time before the Wish tournament tomorrow. And I know everybody is worried about younger Toguro, but do not worry. If you are down to clown, I've got the answer for you. This is a deck that's going to beat every single younger Toguro. Let me explain to you the tools that you're going to use to do it. So right off the bat, number one, in my opinion, right now is Runaway. Attacks are getting really, really big. They're getting hard to block. Runaway does an absolutely amazing job of not only nullifying basically every damage pump that opponent puts onto a card, but it also stops on hit triggers, prevents the opponent from getting momentum from the attack, right? So, and of course, adding to progressive difficulty is super, super big, right? So I think that Runaway is a really, really strong option. And then on top of that, we've got Genkai's Guidance. This is the one that wipes the attack completely out of the way. I've only got it as a one of here because it is a pretty hefty cost. A lot of the Death Toguros are going to be playing this as well, and they have tons of foundations to blow up. So we don't quite have too much of that going on. So I've only got it as a one of, but you can experiment. So, you know, this deck is really big. It's at 74 cards currently, but you got to remember that with cards like Steel Muscle Explosion, you know, Beautiful Suzuki, and our character itself, we really don't want to mill out. So while it seems kind of daunting at 74 cards and only 20 attacks, you got to remember that the card flow that we're going to see is going to make having a bigger deck not as imposing as it once, right? So we're going to need to see our key defensive pieces, which is going to allow us to basically play like two of everything that's important here. So I've got basically like no one-ofs. I've got like a successful results and the one-ofs for the asset and the action here, right? But we've got a lot of two-ofs because a lot of these cards do go away once we use them. You know, things with like a flip cost. You know, we have like four-ofs for those, but cards that we can reuse, I feel okay with only having two copies of because we should be able to see them. So we've got the Three Eyes of Hiei. This card is so cool with Suzuki because you get to look to see at the card that you're going to draw, right? You're going to look to see what your opponent's going to check. You can force your opponent to petty squabble in a weird way with this card. It does check a 6. That's why I've got the old version here. So having 6 checks in your deck is going to be important at some point, I'm sure. There's just a lot of really, really cool things you can do, but the most important thing is it changes the zone of this attack. So you can pretty much always have the right block zone with Suzuki most of the time anyways, and in a pinch, you're also going to have access to the Three Eyes of Hiei to change the zone to one that you need it to be. So I thought that was really, really cool. I thought that was really strong, and you know, we're not playing any 2 checks in the deck, so it's worth it having this powerful 3 diff, I think. Card that people are really sleeping on. Protecting Yukina has a really cool combo with Suzuki. You can destroy it to get a momentum, and then it will be the top card of your discard pile, so you can block with it with Suzuki, and then you can discard 1 momentum after you block with this card. The blocked attack deals no damage. So that is really, really cool. And then on top of that, we've got struggling with studies, right? So one of the things to remember with Chaos Defense is they get to reuse a lot of these powerful tools that have come out that don't leave the card pool after they've been used, right? So unlike Nullify, unlike some of the other powerful actions in the past, things like Genkai's Guidance are not going to leave the game once they leave your card pool. So while there is a heavy cost to these cards, which is probably why they don't have that clause like Runaway, you still do have to lose the life, and if it gets canceled, you are in a lot of trouble. So we'll cover that in a minute, but you know, having access to these, and I think a lot of the Death Toguros are kind of relying on, you know, these sort of gimmicky 1 point of interaction kind of tricks, but struggling with studies has been super relevant for a very long time for a really good reason. And one of the other things it does is going to help you against Byakko decks in the format. There is a certain amount of flip going on, right? Dragon Strike is still pretty popular. Targeted flip, pretty good. So that's going to protect it along with Chivalrous. Chivalrous is going to protect you from those 80%. You don't always necessarily, because of the way it works, right? You don't destroy the foundation, but you will still build the 2. You do have to watch out for your deadlock. But I think at this point, the way that games are going and the way that people are playing, they're kind of like racing to deadlock to be the first one to establish themselves in deadlock. And there's really not much you can do if a younger Toguro draws the 80%, right? They're going to get you into that deadlock sooner or later. You're going to have to keep up because they're going to be getting a lot of. It also is like our card draw, like Suzuki functions for almost all of our card draw, but it's never bad to have this 1-5. Like, I mean, you gotta remember this card was like what, $20-$30 at one point. Crazy stuff. Really powerful defensive interactions for things that I feel like you're gonna have to expect to see. Just really good chaos staples. Also, we need low blocks on chaos. So these are some pretty good low blocks. Moving down the list, we've got elasticity because of all those snack times that are going around in the death and the all versions of the younger Toguro lists. So elasticity is going to be a really big deal. It's also going to be where you get some of your damage bump. It's also going to be where you get damage reduction when you've run out of cute little tricks to do, cute little Suzuki things, right? You're going to need that -3 damage sometimes to stay alive. It's going to buy you an extra turn. But for the most part, it's really here is our stun hate. And the stun hate is really interesting because it gives us momentum. And that is something when we get to the offense, we're going to have to talk about. But elasticity is mostly here for this damage pump because we are going to have to rely on the idea that some of our attacks are going to get blocked. It's just how it is. You can't expect everything to land in a deck like this. And you're going to have to maneuver your way through offensive turns, paying attention to the board state. Right? You're going to have to really play through your opponent's interaction, and I think that's just where we are in the format right now. And we do have some really cool interaction for their interaction with Incredible Display. Incredible Display is such a strong card. It's so cool with Suzuki because we can block with a card with a foundation specifically from our discard pile and then immediately pick it up with Incredible Display. So if it's something that we might really want to build for next turn, because this is not a super fast deck, you shouldn't really be expecting to turn to a 32 health character or these 36, 38 health characters anyways. So we're in it for the long haul, right? So getting momentum is pretty important for interacting with these powerful response wars that I think you might find yourself in going into this format. But it's mostly here to help us cover our block zones, always having that high block, the death version and the all version both like really run a whole lot of high attacks. Sometimes you're gonna face the tray size turn, right? And you even with your Suzuki might only find one low block. And Incredible Display says you're always gonna have 2 of one zone. Same thing with Struggling too, right? If they play 3 attacks, these are the block redundancies that kind of help fix our block zones. And speaking of fixing block zones, this one I think is really cool. This one you could maybe probably cut and try to find a more potent interaction. This is really only a block fixer, but it is new and it is cool. And so I thought it was important enough to put in here, but you could probably add like training with Gunhead or some other kind of throw hate, right? Because I do expect throws to be pretty relevant. And our throw hate is good, but our throw hate is also fairly conditional. So pitching in is a block fixer, but there's not a whole lot of offensive synergy with this card. So it is a little low impact, but it is also a 6 check to go with their 3 Eyes of Hiei. So I think it's very cool. It's something Suzuki can use that's pretty unique. So I thought it deserved a spot on this list, and it's going to be great in a pinch. Something that's going to be great all the time is graceful maneuvers. So Suzuki is very good at chain blocking. Once you do have some speed reduction out, we do have some really good block modifiers. If we look at the blocks in this deck, there's a ton of +1 blocks. We got +1s on every zone, right? Our attacks have +1s on every zone. We've even got, +1 mid block, omni block, foundation here. So we do have the ability to chain block, and the thing that's going to allow us to chain block is using graceful maneuvers along with struggling with studies, especially against those card pool clogging decks. Because if you notice, I'm working in the other decks that are going to be in this format. It's not just younger Toguro that this deck is prepared for. It's prepared to defend against the Karamas, the card pool stuffers of the world. So, it's got some heat into everybody. So graceful maneuvers has got to be there. Fast friendship has got to be there. The flip for -3 speed is a great rate. You don't have to commit it. So very, very powerful speed hate card. This is something that you might want to block with and pick back up and, kind of rebuy for later use, because speed hate will be important when you're trying to block these really long streams with all these 4-diff hand trip attacks. Problem solving is really, really cool in this deck because not only is it stun hate in your stage, but pretty much at any time, Suzuki can discard this for +1 to a check, right? Very potent stuff to discard it, to draw a card, get +1 to your check, then commit Suzuki, block with it with a high block, like very, very cool tech. That's pretty much the bread and butter Suzuki game, right? Is I'm going to see a new card and then block with the one that I discarded. Problem solving is one of the best cards for that, and we had to add more stun hate. We have to have stun hate. These snack times that are going to be barreling down on you will become oppressive if you don't find your stun hate early. So these are some cards that might want to be mulliganing for into this matchup. I don't know if they're exactly the most important, but you got to really get a feel for which version of younger Toguro you're facing, because he's good on all three of his symbols, right? So we are mostly focused on that matchup, even though this deck is good into the other decks of the format. The only thing we're really, really missing from this main board, in my opinion, is our speed reset. Chaos is in a tough spot with encouraging training partner being gone. Your actual speed reset is really good because it reduces it to 0, not just printed or like a static number like 4. But if you do block, which, of course you're going to block if you use this, you get to commit a rival foundation. So this might make it into your main board if you feel like you can get momentum, because this deck is really good at putting out obnoxious pokes. And I think you'll do a really good job at getting like 1 or 2 momentum most of the time with this deck. But you do have to be in it for the long haul, because we are playing Dimensional Spheres, right? Dimensional Sphere kind of hates on that Toguro once per turn, not letting him build it down, making him play another attack to get it going. I do think you should try to save this for throws, and I do think you should save this for echo attacks, or maybe like Reconstructed Wreckers if you fight against the evil version, because removing the card from his card pool and letting him play another attack and then just do the response it's not that much value, right? But it is an omni block effectively. It does have stun on it. You get board pressure. It's an annoying attack to block. It's a great attack to follow up like an elasticity with. You make it like a 5 mid for 4 stun 1, and then you still get to draw the cards. It's really there because it is a super important defensive tool, and it combos with Confused really well for like those long games post sideboard. You can really remove a lot of attacks from the game. So if you've got like another slow matchup like a Jin or another Suzuki where you're both turboing through your deck to find the good ones, removing the good ones from the game when you can could be an important strategy. Suzuki Flurry, of course, is here because it is the super big dunk. Cheerful Uppercuts in here because I think it's good right now in this format. It is a charge because you'll see that we have double Jet Pummel as our combo. That's our we need some check help. We need some extension. We need to be able to put strings together, right? You got to put a nice big long string together. And right now, I don't think it's super duper important that you're sending like massive bombs. The way that, because people are like prepared for that, right? They're ready for younger Toguro to be sending 4 high for 8s and stuff. And we have to play a different game. We have to have some diversity. While we do pretty much want to just be playing as many attacks as we possibly can, and we're going to be settling for dealing a little bit less damage. Cheerful Uppercut does have that zone mix-up. It does have that powerful defensive response when you block with it. I think will keep you alive early game. But you can easily replace this with like an Armor of the Wolf if you feel like you need a momentum dump for late game that's better than just +4 damage. Suzuki can get that one ramped up to a whole lot of damage with the response. Once you get like a bunch of beautiful Suzukis out, Armor of the Wolf is really, really good, right? So you can replace this one if you want to be a little more offensive focused. There's the... I can't remember what it's called, but there's actually a surprisingly good present mic attack. It's like 5 mid for 2, but it gets bonus damage based on the block mod at the top of either player's discard pile. So you can make it like a 4 difficulty 5 mid 5 very easily. And it has charge. It is a low block, which is the zone that we have the least of. So there's some options to replace this with more aggressive choices, but I figured we are going to be like the defensive, sort of reactive deck here that's going to poke and get damage where we can. We do have Training Knife Strike. This one is super, super interesting. I think it is kind of the glue that's going to hold this deck together. It's really the spice that's going to make it something different and catch your opponent off guard, because we do have the Void symbol. So our opponent does have to block this or lose a card, right? And your opponent doesn't want to deal with that because of Suzuki Flurry. So we can really put the opponent in some really tough situations. And then on top of that, it's going to clear our card pool and deadlock. So again, everyone's turboing out to deadlock. Everyone wants to be like the first one into deadlock. A lot of these TOGURO decks, the way that they play, the way that they, need to refill their hand and do their response, they're not shy of going into deadlock. And so we can punish that. We can not only clear our card pool of 2 cards, but add them to momentum. So that way we can get our EX going. We can get the Suzuki enhance. The additional cost to block can really throw people off. So I think this one is really, really neat that it fits so well into this deck. It's been looking for a home for so long. It's so, benign with its 3 mid for 5 stats for a 5 diff. But this is a deck where we're not obsessed with stats. We do have some stat pumps, right? We've got beautiful Suzuki to make our cards hard to block, and then we've got Suzuki Flurry, and we've got a 4 mid for 6 with Spiral Wave Surge. But if you notice, most of this is just about getting really safe pokes in. This is about presenting a bunch of attacks that you don't really want to block, and then we're going to cook up a massive attack that you cannot block. So the attack lineup is based around having like really good flexible positions, because you're not going to get to just say on turn 2 as my 6-hander, I will put together 32 damage. Very often it's possible. It's very possible you can play like 4 attacks and you double jab into a Suzuki Flurry and you drew just an obscene amount of cards, and you can put it together. So you have that capability, but really you're going to have to navigate the field a little bit longer to acquire the resources. But double jab pummel in this character, it's such a nasty combo enhance to try and block, because you're going to get to see so many cards if your opponent is willing to block these. Most people are not, especially 32 health characters who are holding 1 or 2 cards and they're defending from their stage. They're not going to want to interact with this one too much. And it also has deadlock, right? It also has deadlock +5, so you can really get those crazy multiple Suzuki Flurry strings going late game. It doesn't have charge for Suzuki Flurry, so sequencing it might get a little bit weird, but between Spiral Wave Surge and Double Jab Pummel, we shouldn't have too many issues passing our checks in a pre-deadlock world. And then Training Knife Strike is going to allow us to really pass those checks post-deadlock. So the attack lineup doesn't seem super impressive at first glance, but I promise you, once you get a couple of reps in, I know there's only like 24 hours. There's not a lot of time to put this together. I just figured it out. I just solved the format myself, and I'm getting this to you guys as soon as I possibly can. But once you learn how to play footsies with this deck, once you give it the old, razzle dazzle, the old rope a dope, and you learn where to get your strikes in, and you have to trust that your character is going to allow you to see the blocks that you need, right? You're going to have to trust that you don't have to play attacks to enter the enhanced step, and you can wait for your opponent to play attacks to go digging for the things that you need. So I think the only thing I didn't talk about were the assets, but like League of Villains and Cape of No Return should be very self-explanatory. They're really solid 4-check assets that in a longer game, you're going to need to eat an attack out of the game. So Cape of No Return seemed like a no-brainer. League of Villains seems like a no-brainer. Cancel anything on what? An Attacker Foundation? Yeah. And then the burn response is kind of weird when it comes up, but don't forget about it, right? After your opponent plays in Billy on a committed foundation, so most things that ready themselves, right? there's a couple more in Yu Yu Hakusho, so don't forget that response. But I felt like these were pretty self-explanatory. Anyways, this is the deck that I've got. The sideboard's kind of real. The sideboard's not super 100% legit, but Confused is good for the decks that care about stun attacks and care about having, really specific keywords. It counts as throw hate. Evil versus good, there's a lot of airy smiles and showdowns and Genkai's guidances going around. And while Incredible Display does interact with those, it costs some momentum, and I feel like having the trap from the hand is a pretty good thing to have. So you can get some pretty powerful cancels going in this current format. Passer walls if they have annoying assets that you need to deal with, or they're just playing a bunch of breaker attacks. If there's just a bunch of breakers being flown at you, barrier shield decks, right? You can cancel the breaker off those. Also a 6-check. Childlike appearance we talked about, it's the speed reset. And then we got the 4th runaway. So I think the sideboard is pretty legit. But again, every universe's deck is going to be very personal. You're going to have things that you don't like about this list and would want to change out. But I'd be very stoked if you guys play this in the Wish tournament. Tag me somewhere on social media. Hit the hashtag #DownToClown. And good luck in the Wish tournament tomorrow.